Welcome to KRCrossing Chronicles. And this week we are talking about the first pillar in the 5 pillars of recap, which is resource management. Michele, I know resource management is what we ultimately came up with, but there are a lot of different things that you could conceivably call your first pillar that start with R and are very convenient. But how did we land on resource as the most critical component of this pillar?
Great place to start, Rich. With anything, whether it's project management, getting yourself ready for an interview, starting a new job, you always think about what's the foundation? Where do you want to begin? The ground up, the inside out, the outside in. Or for whatever it is that you're kind of starting on a journey. And with project management, there, as you've referenced, there are a number of different words that you can kind of think of. Okay, am I ready? Right? Am I ready to tackle this project? That's R. How reliable? So reliable are the partners you're working with. Are they respected? From the general contractor to the architect, your trades, are they highly respected in the industry, in the community, in their contributions? Resource, right? So kind of that's the foundation, right? The resources that you have. Do you have the right resources to be successful? What relationships? That's even more of a foundation. What relationships do you have? What relationships are existing? What do you need to build to be able to move forward on your project management journey? And when you put all those together and you really think about what is that foundation is the detailed project plan that you need to have in place that outlines the journey from beginning to end. And that starts with our resource management.
All right, so you mentioned plan, which for anybody who knows us well, we love spreadsheets, we love detail and thinking out plan A through Z and then a couple extra. We really thrive on it, and I think we take it to a level that's beyond what most people would expect. But we do that for a very specific reason, and it ties really well into resource management and getting that plan set up so that we can use it. You mentioned having all of these different things that we can use and knowing that they're reliable and that we can rely on them. But if you have 100 different things, but you can't manage which one to tap and when, I'm big on task saturation and the fact that in a project you can get so busy that if I ask you for your name on the middle of a job site, you're going to hold up a finger and say, hold on 1 second, let me complete this thought and I'll get back to you. Having a good plan is really powerful for mitigating that. So how do you think about creating that plan and then utilizing that through a project?
And you're absolutely right, right? Project management is all about the plan. Make the plan and work the plan. So at its simplest form, having a plan, what does it allow you to do? It allows you to ensure that the work that you are going to start, regardless of where it is in that project, it progresses efficiently, and any issues that pop up along the way are going to be identified and addressed promptly because you're following a very detailed project plan. And that plan consists of a lot of its own individual plans, right? And of course, because we are project managers, oftentimes we come up with acronyms that are going to help us guide us through that, such as RECAP, starting with resource management. This one doesn't have an acronym, but the plan itself consists, as I said, of a number of different steps along the way. So what are the tasks that are included? What are milestones that are going to identify key points in the timeline? What are the start and end dates? So within each task and the key points, when do they start? When do they end? And how do they integrate with the entire plan itself? Who's going to complete all those tasks? So who do we have on board? Who do we need to find and get on board? Who do we need to tap in from those respected people that we have within our portfolio to be able to guide us through this project plan? And then how will all those people tasks, timelines work together to achieve success.
You just listed off a lot of different things that are really important, but they are at varying levels of detail for that plan. And I know you think about a plan at multiple levels, as not just, one big run-on sentence of we need to do all of this and you can't find your place. So if you could break down a little bit about how you think about kind of the levels of detail from 25,000, 30,000 foot view going down into the minutia, and then once we kind of define those tranches that we think about, we can talk a little bit about how you actually take something out of your brain and get it on to pen and paper or into a computer, so that we can then translate that to the rest of our team and the resources that we have for a particular project.
So what are the tasks that are included? And unfortunately, those also fall into a little bit of detail as well, because that's the foundation of your resource management plan that allows you to execute and move from beginning to end within your project management, whatever that process or the goal is. And it starts with your goal, right? That project initiation. What is it that we want to get to? And then how are we going to get there? So what are our goals? And then what are the objectives in getting there? Keeping in mind that a goal is that very high level. What is it that I want to accomplish? What do I need to do? What am I building this project management calendar template Gantt chart for? And let's just say we're going to build a 25,000 square foot vanilla box in 10 weeks, and we're going to do it 10% below budget. Then we move into that objective, because if we don't break that goal down and really specific, measurable targets that are time bound, we're never going to get to that goal. So that's the first thing, right? Project initiation within those tasks. Then you're going to go to the next piece of it, which is your planning, the project planning. And this takes into consideration the survey that you're going to have done, the resources that you're going to tap into, the budgets that you're going to have to be able to develop and manage. And oftentimes a survey is pretty much, it can be overlooked at a high level, but the importance of the survey in whatever it is that you're doing cannot be discounted in any way, shape, or form, because it's the minutia of what are you walking into, the detail about the site. What are you working in? What are you working around? What are you working on? What are you working next to? Every possible measurement, detail, distance, elevations, photos, anything and everything that's existing, all of that information informs the start and the state of that project. So you get that survey in place. You start to look at all of those resources and where do those resources fit in? And then using all of that information, you start to build that very important budget. Again, sometimes the degree of the detail is overlooked in that budget, but that is your roadmap. There's a lot of roadmaps in a project management plan, but your budget is your financial roadmap. And if you don't have a fully blown out, detailed roadmap from a financial perspective that you can manage against, you don't have anywhere that you can pause and guide decisions, make smart decisions to be able to move forward. And all of those things work together to meet your goal. Another task that you're going to really have to spend a lot of time in is the design and engineering component, right? So design is not just about the pretty drawings to hand over to the general contractor. What else does it include? Based on the survey that you've just spent a lot of time doing and in a lot of detail, you're then going to take the task of identifying what are the drawings going to include in order for you to build your 25,000 square foot vanilla box, architectural, structural, your mechanical, your electrical, your plumbing, fire, life safety, permits. All of those design and engineering components are important to building that project plan. And then moving into your procurement and contract management. So once you have figured out what it is you want to build, What are the steps that we're going to take to get there? What is the project planning in the survey component? What are you doing there? You've defined your budget. You've then set forward to define all of the different design and engineering components that you need to back into your plan. You then need to figure out who's going to make those purchasing decisions, right? How's your procurement and your contract management going to work? Who approves the dollars that are going to spend? Who negotiates? Who executes a contract? What are all of the integral components of making the purchase decisions that are going to back up the budget that you did in the second part of the tasks in your project management plan? Moving into construction execution would be your next task. And we're going to pause on that. We're going to come back to that one at a later point, because that alone is a tremendous part of this piece of the project management piece and the tasks. There's the risk management and the issue resolution. We're also going to pause on that because that's another very monumental component of the construction piece, how we're going to monitor it, control it. And then the last task would be project closure. So there's a lot of tasks in there that work all together from project initiation through to project closure that make a project management tool and the resource management component. Step one, make it work and be successful and achieve that goal that you had of in 10 weeks at 10% below budget.
Love it.
I'm
And
going to
I
pause
love
there
the,
to see if there's any other questions that you wanted to ask specific to that before I move into the last 4 steps, if you will, of the development of the project plan and the resource management pillar.
yeah, why don't I can tee up for that a little bit, because I love the idea of setting the goal first. You know, I think of it a little bit, you know, like everybody's experienced planning a road trip on Google Maps, or trying to figure out where you're going. If you just start from, you know, your house or your office and try to figure out where you're going, yeah, at the end of the day, you might get to where you wanted to end up, but it's not going to be very pretty. You really need to know, okay, I'm going from point A to point B, and this is my boundaries. This is my goal of what I'm trying to achieve. And then you're breaking down that journey into those steps, you know, your project initiation, your project planning, going through your design engineering. And as you said, in each one of those phases, there is, you know, that task. And then underneath that, there is a whole list of other tasks that are important to that bucket. But you're splitting those out into those levels where we can zoom out and go, okay, yes, I'm trying to go from my office to go visit this construction site 200 miles away. But here's all of the different things that I need to do. And then once I get to this specific phase, there's something else that I should be paying attention to make sure that I execute this particular task really well. But it allows you to segment those and really pay attention to what you need when you need it. And you mentioned, you know, milestones and timelines, which to me are really important to then use those resources well and understand, you know, what list you're drilling down into, right? All of this information is useless if, you know, if I'm on a trip and I missed my exit, but my brain is on the back roads, I'm never going to realize that I made a mistake. I think the milestones and the timelines are really powerful for us to understand where in a project we are and where we need to then focus our attention and our energy to understand what's going on and then resolve those issues. So why don't you talk us through those next components about, you know, when we're executing the construction, when we're resolving issues and managing the risk of a project as our timeline ebbs and flows, and how that ties back into the detailed lists that we've created at the beginning.
Of course. So you mentioned milestones, timelines, and I'm going to add the last 2, resource allocation and then dependencies, because all of those 4 build on the first 8 that we talked through. The project initiation, the planning of the surveys, the budgets, the design and engineering, the drawings, the permits, inspections, etc., procurement and contract management. So how are we going to pay it? Who's going to pay? And then the construction execution, risk management, project monitoring and control, and then project closure that we're going to talk about at a later point. Those lay out that project plan. But without these next 4 components, you've you don't have the meat and potatoes in there that is then going to allow you and support managing that plan, right? We said in the beginning, make the plan, work the plan. So those first 8 components are making the plan. These add the frosting on the cake, if you will, to then allow you to work the plan. So we'll talk about milestones first. And milestones, these are those critical events, achievements that have to happen that in that key in your timeline, you need to ensure that are met. And when you have a project plan and you can move things around, those milestones or the critical path, if those get moved, you're at risk. So those are the points in your project plan that you have to stay really close to. It could be approvals. So in the beginning of the project, design approvals. It could be your start date. It could be a point in which you're doing inspections, or just when you have to make sure that all of your exterior is closed up. So those are the elements that if you skip those, and you miss those critical milestones, you have to really think back and make some significant decisions as to how you can keep the project moving and achieve that project in that 10-week timeline that we had defined in the beginning in our goals and objectives. And it's also back to where your budget comes into play, right? Your budget is how you're going to help make decisions, and then also your procurement and your contract management. The next thing that's important in there is the timelines. All of these milestones and the foundation in which we talked through, the 8 elements, they all have a start and an end. And the start and the end follow through from beginning of the project to the end of the project. So mobilization to completion, turnover, either one of those words makes sense in this particular case. But they all have to flow in a manner in which you're putting one before the other that makes sense. And that's where those dependencies come in. So things that are interrelated and work together and have to follow an A, B, and C. So you can't do D unless A, B, and C is done. And then the next component would be your resource allocation. Who's going to do it? Who's going to do the phases, the tasks, and all of the elements that we have within that plan to then achieve the goal that you've established in the front of the project. So there's a lot of different parts and pieces. And I know that when we are finished with this, we're gonna get it out there so that all of you can not only visually see it, but there'll be some key points that we'll be able to really highlight. So if you're taking notes, I only wish that you were taking notes, but if you were taking notes, we'll try to give you that information so that you can really follow through in a much better way than just verbally.
Awesome. So you mentioned notes. I think that's a perfect segue to how we essentially note take this entire process. There's a lot of different ways to do it. There's some that I think people in the industry will recognize really clearly. And I think at the end of the day, having some type of framework to manage all of these things and understand, how everything is tied together and use it effectively and efficiently is really important. So why don't you talk a little bit about, what you use and what you prefer to see as, when somebody's building this out, what are the tools that we can use to take this out of our heads and put it into the real world to then actively use on a project?
So you're right. There's a lot of tools that are out there. Certainly far more today than 35 years ago when I started in this business. 35 years ago, we didn't even have Excel. So we kind of built our own project plan on a very large data sheet. The concept is the same, the thinking is the same, the process is the same. But certainly today it's much easier, much quicker, much faster. Everyone really kind of has their own comfort zone. And I find that working with general contractors, and we have a great portfolio of general contractors that we work with, trust, they also have their own. So it's not only what's out there, but what is everybody using? And then how do you blend with that so that everybody is on the same page. And there still is some very basic Excel programs that you can build yourself, and you don't need to spend a lot of money. You can spend a lot of money. You can spend a lot of money, but you can also use Microsoft tools that are readily available if you have the Microsoft suite of software on your computer, and you can use their tool as a starting point and build from there. And then as you build, what happens with any type of a project management tool, you build it best case scenario. If you're going to do your own, you're going to build it best case scenario. And then as you go through, things will pop up. And then the more projects you do, the more you can fine tune that. So when something pops up and it's a critical element that you needed to think about in the beginning and you didn't, so what do we do? How do we make that decision? That's going back to some of the tasks that we talked about. But there's many years that I've used them, and very successfully so. So don't ever feel like you need to shell out a whole bunch of cash just to get a project management tool. You don't. If you're good at Excel, you can make your own. Now, for all of those software companies out there who might be want me to give them a little bit of plug, I will shout out to Procore. I think Procore, it is an amazing web-based tool. It serves the project manager, it serves the contractor, it serves the architect, it serves the owner, or who's ever in charge and responsible for the owner. It manages, it's everything centralized. It manages your schedule, it manages your critical path, it manages your change orders, your RFIs, your submittals. It's accessible and available to anybody who's part of that project, who can look at it, view it, ask questions, pull documents off of it. So it is a great tool. It's also cha-ching. So you have to be doing quite a few projects to have that. Again, a lot of general contractors use that. There's another one out there called Buildertrend. It's very similar. It's a little bit more project management, client focused, right? Kind of an interchange between those two players within the project, but it offers up the same tools and vehicle in which you need to manage a project. It's just managed at a different level. So it's more of a communication out project management tool software. If you're working on capital projects and specifically associated to like healthcare and public sector, similar to our conversations about, and I think it was in our first podcast, how the healthcare industry is becoming more retail centric. They would be a good user of eBuilder because it's built for really large large costs associated to a project, multi-million-dollar project. So it's a little bit of a different approach. A Gantt chart, basic old bar chart, works really well. Also illustrates a project schedule, and I have general contractors that use that and use it quite successfully. It's quick and easy to develop. It's quick and easy to monitor. It's quick and easy to communicate. So it's a pretty straightforward, but it shows those important elements. Who's doing it? What are the dependencies between all of those elements? What's the current schedule status? What do we need to adjust to be able to get to the end zone? And then, as I said, Microsoft, if you're going to just kind of go with the kind of the basic. What I will caution everyone to is most important about choosing the tool in which you're going to use to project manage or manage a specific project, regardless of the size. You need to understand what you need and what you don't need, because you could be a one-man show and you're doing everything. You could be a 5-man show. You could have direct reports, people that you need to report to. So really understand what you need, more importantly, and what you don't need, and start small. You don't have to go for the whole shebang in the beginning. As a project manager, the more detail you have, the more closely you can monitor. But as a project manager, you always have to start a really detailed, focused, anal retentive, analytical mind, because that's the path you've chosen in your life. And as a project manager, you possess those skills. So you can start small and then build as you go. And as I said, fine tune along the way. And you'll have a tool that works for you and your clients, and you can be quite successful that way.
Yeah, awesome. I've always said, the best tool that you can use is the one you will actually use. If you, decide to start out with a Procore and it's a big behemoth and you don't use it because you don't get it and the learning curve is too steep from what you understand, it's going to be a fancy thing that you put on the shelf and spend a lot of money to say that you use Procore, where maybe a simple Excel sheet or a Gantt chart is what you need for that timepiece. And if you start with that, and when you build to Procore, hopefully you start out and maybe you grow your business to the point where Procore is required, you will not lose out on the lessons learned of doing it from a simpler method. It all translates to those bigger programs. You can use them better. You can get more out of all of the functionality that they provide. So I think it's some great advice to define what you need it for and use what you understand, and you can work with really well. You will get far more value out of that than you will trying to shoot for the moon and buy some big fancy program because that's what you feel you need to have status. Nobody cares about status in a program. I just care about the information that's in it and the fact that you can use it well. That to me is far more important than the name on the file of what you sent me.
And achieving the goals that you set out to, because that's what your clients are going to remember.
Right.
Did you build it when you said you were going to build it? Did you turn it over when you said you were going to turn it over? And did you do it within the budget that we've defined?
Yeah,
so
if you
against
turn
that
over
and
on time and 10% under budget, nobody will care that you manage a project with Google Sheets if that's what you manage a project with. That will never be a second thought. They will focus on the fact that you were on time and 10% under budget, because that's the start of the goal of this entire conversation, right? We achieved the goal.
Right, exactly. And all of this works with effective resource management, right? Effective resource management, a detailed project plan, any project, small, large, commercial, residential, small box, big box. If you don't have a plan in place, if you don't utilize effectively your resources, regardless of what they are, people, financial, plan, the partners that you have, you're going to fail. You're going to fail because you're going to get scope creep, because you're not going to be paying attention to it. And all of a sudden, your scope is going to be way larger than your budget. You're going to have schedule overruns. You're going to miss a deadline. You're not going to be paying attention to it. And then all of a sudden, you've lost a week. A week in a 10-week construction project is extremely hard to catch up on. Budget escalation. You're not paying attention to your dollars. You're not paying attention to the tasks, the start and end dates, the resources, who's doing it and when. Your budget is going to start going through the roof. All of these areas, even communication, right? You don't have that good plan. You're not going to feel like you can confidently speak to your client about where you're at. What's our next milestone? Are we on schedule? Are we off schedule? Are we tracking to our final dates? All of a sudden you lose that communication because you're a little bit unsure about what's going on, and whether it's the scope creep or the budget escalation, any of those things. And then there's risk out there that you can easily lose control on, and nobody wants to be managing any kind of risk. And ultimately your quality is going to get compromised because all of a sudden you've got tremendous pressure. Get that project done, get it in under budget, and then you start racing the clock. And then all of those things that you need to get done to your specification so that you can be proud of that project, they go out the window.
Awesome. So we just covered an immense amount of information in a relatively short amount of time. As Michele mentioned, we will get something put together of notes on everything. So if you're taking notes or feel like you missed anything, you won't have to re-listen to the entire podcast for that one sentence that you feel like you want to hear again. And we will be back with you next time to go over the second pillar of recap, which is efficient communication and stakeholder management. Until then, everybody have a Great project, and we'll talk to you next time.
See you next time.